Hello, my fellow comic book collectors. It's Alan, the Comic Collector Geek, and this is going to be a really great interview. This is a guy that runs a really awesome channel, Lunch Money Comics, and his channel is interesting because he goes out and he hunts. He hunts for the cool books, and he hunts with a budget in mind, like a very low budget. I wish I could be so diligent myself. I'm not. But he does really well, and he finds some pretty awesome things. And he's actually picked up some pretty amazing collections, and that's how we met, not through collecting, but he had just picked up some pretty awesome collection, and we were on a live stream, and he was telling me about it, and it was pretty amazing. So I said, hey, you got to come on my show and do an interview. So without further ado, let's get into it and bring on Lunch Money Comics.
Hey guys.
Hey,
Alan.
So I thought that was a reasonable summary. I don't know. I'm not very good at these intros. I just wing it and hope for the best.
No, I mean, that's what I do all the time, man. That's how I live my life. But yeah, no, that's exactly it. Started my channel on a whim late last summer. And originally it was because, I saw a lot of YouTube videos of people buying, like really expensive books. And I grew up very short on money as a kid. And, I used to save my lunch money up. I'd like kind of starve myself at school just to be able to like get the $1.25 to buy the comic book, down the street. And and that's kind of where I came up with the name. I want to show a channel where you can build a really good collection really cheap. I am very blessed to be in New England, surrounded by flea markets and antique shops. And after a summer of just like hitting gold, and every time I went out, I said, I wonder if people would like this. Made a couple of videos just to see, just have fun, and then off to the races it went. I kept finding good stuff. I
think it's the hunt that people really like. People love that hunt thing, where people, sticking through long boxes and stuff like that.
And people have told me that, like it's it's the ASMR kind of like going through the long boxes, like you're there, feeling like you're about to find something. And that's what I like. That's what appeals to me.
That next comic, is it going to be a biggie?
It's it. You never know if it's going to be the next one. And like I said, I've been lucky enough that I've been finding some pretty good ones. I'm very diligent. And of course, it's a little bit of selection bias. People don't see the thousands of books I go through that are awful, but
of course,
people live vicariously through me, I guess. And it's been fun, and I've met so many great people through the community that growing up I didn't really have I had one friend who liked comic books, so a little bit of this was an outlet to meet people. And God, I've met all of you guys, and I enjoy doing these. So thanks for having me.
It's a great little community, I find. Actually, it's funny. Whenever I watch your videos, it's like, that's a key. That's a key.
I know.
You're screaming at the thing.
And I get it. Also, and there's a little bit of filming magic going on. I feel bad. People always tell me, you missed this, you missed that.
Yeah.
I didn't. So what ends up happening is a lot of times I'm going through with both hands, and I know it's in the box. And then if I see something good, I'll have to go back. I'm like ruining the magic here. A lot of times at the time.
Yeah, I get it.
But I have to film like B footage. So a lot of times I'll know. So I'll skip by it, or vice versa. I'll go through quick. You'll see the footage, and then I go back in and pull out a lot of the other ones. So it's usually,
is there ever a point where you leave in a key that you kind of pretend to skip?
Or... I have never done that. I've I've paused when I was going through and said, I got to start filming because that's a good book, and I put it back. Before I pull it out. Okay. Yeah, because I don't want to pull it out and inspect it. But I never do that. But sometimes I find a book before I'm ready, and I'll just stop, make sure the camera's framed right, and then it is what I thought it was. Yeah.
Giant size X-Men #1. What is this doing?
That's never happened. I've never planted the seed, heated the piles, but I ruined the magic a little bit. But
I was kind of freaking out a little bit when you showed that it wasn't you that picked it up either. It was the other guy that picked up the Super Magician. Yeah, that's a big book. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, and some people gave me a hard time on that one too because from their perspective, what they thought I was doing was I wanted these books. And then someone just took it and bought it from me. But I knew the guy who was buying it. It was another comic dealer there. And so I cut the footage because he was talking to me. He's like, you're not going to buy that. I said, no. He's like, I want that. So I handed it to him. I cut out that 10-second of dialogue. And everyone's like, that guy stole that book from you. I was like,
totally. No. That's the way, it's funny.
I know. Yeah. So but he bought it without hesitation.
That was a brilliant sale, by the way. That guy did really well because that book normally would go for about $2,000-3,000.
Yeah, he got it for 17.
Okay,
Yeah.
1700. So that's
Yeah.
not bad. You know,
Yeah.
about
Yeah.
half.
He was, yeah, pretty much half. And like the guy who was selling them just got that whole collection in. And there was really great stuff. I mean, I wasn't going to pull the trigger on a book that big that day.
Yeah,
It was fun to
it's
look
not
at.
really quite lunch money at that point. It's more
No,
like
banquet money,
lunch month or
vacation money. Right, I could have gone to
vacation
Quebec
money.
City, for the same
Yeah.
cost. So, but that was cool. Like, there was some really good books. They're fun to look at. But that guy, he sells things cheap. He buys big collections. He turns them over quickly. So,
Mm-hmm.
same thing. And that book sold, and then a $3,000 comic book sold right next to me from
Oh, really?
another
What
couple. And
was
they
that one?
recognized me from my channel. They, hey, Lunch Money Comics, are you going to buy this? They said no. And they're like, on the spot, they bought a $3,000 comic book.
What was it? Do you remember?
It would have been in that footage. I'm blanking on which one it
Okay,
was.
that's funny.
Blue Bomber, maybe, was that what it was?
Is
I'll have to go
another
back.
like Golden Age or?
Yeah, it was the Golden Age one. Yeah, it was all the Golden Age
Oh
books.
wow.
So I'll have to go back
Or
and see.
Blue
But
Beetle, maybe? Blue Beetle?
I think it was what it was.
Okay, yeah.
So.
There's some big good girl covers in there.
Oh, yeah.
So.
Yeah.
But wow, that's I wish I had those opportunities. Like there's really very few good comic shops in this area. So I think that's another reason why your channel's so popular. People are like me, like they're in the situation where we don't get the access to go out on the hunt, find some cool stuff. Is it your area just really good for that, or what?
I've always wanted that. So obviously flea markets, and I mean New England's old and historic, and there's flea markets everywhere. We love them. Same thing where I specifically live because I'm close to the big Brimfield flea market, the largest flea market in America. Because of that, lots of the surrounding towns have antique shops, consignment shops. But the whole comic book store thing, I grew up right outside of Boston. Every town has multiple comic book stores. And I moved out here to Western Mass. I thought it was rural, but it's not bad. Again, I'm within 20 minutes, half an hour of many comic book stores. I didn't realize how lucky I was until I hear from other people that say, yeah, I'm like a 2-hour drive.
It's a desert here.
Take it for granted. You really take it for granted. Again, and what I experience out here is nothing compared to where I grew up outside of Boston. I mean, they're everywhere. It's the same thing. I'm sure it's the same when you're around New York or whatever. So it's just the product of being in a high density part of
you get New York is probably, in my opinion, the best city just for comic hunting. I was there 1 month and I was like, oh my goodness, it's just like it was insane. Like the stuff that was even considered like sort of trash in a way, they were just it was amazing stuff that you could find. But that was we don't have that.
No, I mean, like I said, we're just talking. I just got back from Quebec City, Canada, and I was shocked to find out that there was this one comic book store in Quebec City. It's a city of like 200,000 people plus. And there's evidently one, which blew my mind.
Was it any good? At least was it at least?
It was interesting. It was different. It was good. I mean, it was on par. It was like a small shop around here, but it had very interesting things. And actually, I have a couple things I can show off to you while I'm
cool.
So yeah, it was cool.
So, I know, like from our conversation that we had last time when we were on the live stream. Well, actually, not in the live stream itself, but when we were behind the scenes, you are not just a comic guy. You're into a lot of things. How did you get into comics per se? Like how is that? I'd like to know how comics is part of your whole collecting thing.
So the comics were probably like the first thing, right? So when I was about, like 8 years old or so, a family friend gave me a box of comic books. They're like, here you go. And there was probably hundreds of comic books in there. I would say like 90% of them were DC, and most of those were Flash and Superman. There was a lot of like horror stuff in there that I was probably too young for. Boris Karloff, some other creepy stuff I have nightmares from when I was a kid.
Nice.
And there were a few X-Men and Spider-Man books. But I was little, I was like 8 years old, and I liked the Flash because of that. But then when I was a little bit older, some kid I knew bought those Marvel trading cards at the card store. And he was looking for a hologram. He didn't find one. He just handed me hey, you go, kid, take these cards. And my mind was blown. They had stats on the back. I'm like, I know
those are cool cards.
I have them all. I mean, it really changed. It really made me appreciate Marvel cards. I mean, I went down the rabbit hole at that point. The fact that I could, even having the books I did, when you're coming in fresh, books you've never seen before, you have no idea who these characters are, and just kind of learning in the middle of a story to actually be like, oh, that X-Men character, I didn't know, the guy with the claws. I get it now. This has a quick summary of what he is. That makes a big difference. You know what I mean? I knew who Spider-Man was. Everyone does, but I didn't know his name was Peter Parker. Things like that You read
Yeah,
the
having
cards, you
all those like
understand.
little stats about the characters is really great.
Yeah, it's like a one-card summary, cheat sheet of every Marvel character. So I started buying the cards, and then I met that one friend out of the blue who was into, his dad really supported his hobby of comic books, and that was it. And we just started collecting, and that's really what pushed me forward in the early '90s, right when the comic boom of the early '90s was
Yeah,
happening. When everyone thought they'd get rich on off the comic books,
yeah.
and all the
Superman,
variants, all
that's a
the
Superman.
yeah, Death of Superman, X-Men 1 was, had just come out.
Yeah.
And then the cartoon came out. The X-Men cartoon, like, really, I mean, I
Yeah,
like the
that
X-Men
really
that
put things in hyperdrive. Yeah.
and hyperdrive,
Yeah.
exactly. And all of a sudden I love Gambit and everything. So
Mhm.
it really was like sort of a chain reaction, all at the exact right time. But it
Mhm.
was also, and actually in a way it was bad, because fell victim to the whole, all the chrome and all the foil covers, in the early '90s. I
They're
bought
fun. They're
all of those.
fun. Yeah.
Yeah. I bought all the gimmicks, instead of buying the older books that I like. But it's funny, I
Mhm.
bought those gimmick ones thinking they'd be worth money, but I also collected ones that I wanted to read,
Okay.
especially X-Men books and Spider-Man books. And not ironically, those are the books, surprise, that end up being worth more because they're
Yeah.
good.
Yeah.
They were good. So like they're worth money.
Yeah.
So I was reading for a long time. I never really stopped collecting. I don't think a year's gone by since 1993 where I haven't bought comic books, but there have been
Okay.
years during college I bought less.
Yeah.
But I collect lots of things. I'm a huge history buff. I love science. I love biology. So
Mhm.
because I'm in an antique area, I love history. I started collecting antiques. It's something my family's always done. My grandmother
Mhm.
got me into it. Coins, you name it. I had coin collections.
Yeah, I
So yeah,
started with coins, then got into comics. So
kind of. Yeah, actually,
I
I
was
think
all the
coins
way
might have been
around.
first. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I started collecting everything else. I collect, natural history specimens, rocks,
Mhm.
minerals, fossils, antiquities, ancient Roman things. I've been collecting that stuff. And when we moved out here, we got a bigger house. I actually had some room. The whole house is my wife's, but I get the basement. The
Oh,
basement's
okay.
mine.
Yeah,
So I
yeah.
started making a museum, a cabinet of curiosities.
That's
And
fun.
I have my office here where you see the comic books. It's also where I work. I have my board games, my D&D setup, my music studio. I'm a
Yeah.
musician as well. So all of
Wow.
these things I've done because I'm just one of those people. I need to be doing things. But when COVID hit and people, collectibles went up, I started like getting rid of stuff. I was kind of going through. I can part with this.
Okay.
Sports cards, I don't need those. And of all the things I was getting rid of, comic
Mhm.
books was not even a question. I'm never going to get rid of. That was the one thing from my
That you
childhood. I'm
want to
like,
keep. Yeah.
I'm keeping them, right? Exactly, because I just had really strong feelings for them. Again, not even cognizant of what was going on in the comic book market or anything. And yeah, and as I started like looking more at these antique places, I kept getting more and more comic books and said, hey, I can. I've always had lots of comics. I never had like expensive comics, but I was
Mhm.
finding them. And then
Yeah.
and I think it was the comic boom. A lot of people started selling them more at these flea markets and stuff. You know what I
But the
mean?
problem was they were selling them at really high prices. It
They
was
were. I think, the lucky thing is, because I'm kind of diligent, you just walk past those and you find someone who says, I think these are worth money, but they're a buck each. You can still
a
find
buck
that.
each or something.
Right. Something that would have seen in the garage before they take out, they just don't price it. So yeah, it
Yeah.
ended up being that before you knew it, I was finding lots of comic books. I was in it again. I felt like I was,
Mhm.
13, 14 years old, and I still have my antiques and stuff. Just the difference is when I went out, I was now looking for comic books first and antiques and stuff second and third
Okay.
instead of the other way around.
That's cool.
Made a
So
YouTube channel, and bang, all of a sudden I'm like, I'm going to comic book shows, which I'd only been to a few in my life.
mhm.
Like, and when I was a teenager. Now I start going to one every month or so. And yeah, you start looking
Wow.
at bigger books, and you start going, all right, these are the books I've always wanted from when I was a kid. I couldn't afford back then, and now I'm older, I don't have to save up lunch money anymore. So yeah, this is the
That's
origin
cool.
story.
So how about you show some of the books? Let's see some of the books that you brought to show.
Well, I would say I just got back from Quebec City, Canada. I just edited my video. I don't know when this video is coming out, but I will be doing.
This will come out probably afterwards because it's going to
Okay.
be about 3 weeks away
Oh,
from when we
perfect. Okay,
record.
so
So you
I
got
will have already shown these. Hopefully, people don't get bored seeing these. So my ancestry is French Canadian, and
okay.
so I've been to Quebec many times. My wife as well. So we were looking. I always look for comic books, and I was
Mhm.
looking for some Quebecois, French language printed in Canada comic books, and I was able to find a whole bunch. But here are 3 of them I actually brought home. We got Power of Warlock, Warlock
Oh
number 7,
wow!
and these are
In
all black and white.
French,
Yeah.
that's really interesting.
Yeah, they're all black and white, which is great because you can see the pencils and the ink work really, really well. Yeah, they say all of them in there. They were Saint Lambert, Quebec, in the
Wow.
70s. So yeah, this one's Yeah, so this is Warlock.
I imagine those would be pretty rare because
maybe they had a ton of them. They were like this, you know, they were just laying there in a box untagged and boarded.
They don't really respect their home
nope,
stuff. Right?
They had price tags right on them, you know.
Wow.
They had a whole bunch of Shang-Chi, right? So we have La Main de Shang-Chi, the hands of Shang-Chi, Maître du Kung Fu, you know, master of Kung Fu. Same thing, really cool. My favorite part about this is that we have a we have a Howard the Duck story in here.
Oh, really?
Yeah, which I didn't know until I got home. I got a kick out of that.
That's
so
funny.
Yeah, pretty cool. Let me see that. And then we got a Fantastic Four Galactus versus the High Evolutionary, which in French is L'Evolutionniste, which I thought was pretty cool. And and honestly, I grabbed these ones because they were the best condition ones. They had tons of these, but most of them, like, they were missing covers. You know, like,
oh wow, it looks like it was like they're readers almost, like
they're readers.
Yeah.
Yep. But they all came out at the same time, the same year as the American versions. They just they're
in French.
Yep.
Oh, that's interesting. I wonder why they did this black and white. Maybe
I don't know. It must have been a money cost savings thing.
Yeah, it's really strange.
My imagination. I had to get this in honor, you know, in fact, I was in Quebec, and because of you, can't go without Alpha Flight. So when I was a kid, you know, because, you know, my ancestry is Canadian, and I've been to Canada a lot, especially as a kid. I was really into Alpha Flight. I thought the idea of like a national superhero team was awesome. The fact that like most of them had like
some Canadian like logo-y stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and the fact that Wolverine obviously was, you know, is Canadian. And then I really like the idea that Canada was well represented. Even like First Peoples were in it, like Shaman, you know, and you had, you know, North Star, who ended up being, you know, the first, you know, gay superhero, at least, you know, mainline. I really thought North Star was really cool. So I really liked Alpha Flight, and I distinctly remember it being a kid because no one liked Alpha Flight except for me, going through these like 50-cent, 25-cent bins and just taking out all the Alpha Flight because no one wanted them. So I have a huge Alpha Flight collection. So I had to get something from Canada, which I thought was pretty cool.
That's interesting.
And in honor of you, I definitely also say that, while I was on the topic and had them, I do have the first appearance of Alpha Flight.
Alpha Flight, nice.
Yeah, so I love X-Men. They're my favorite property. So here's 120, which is the first appearance of them, and then a lot of people usually get 121 because they actually show up on the cover.
Yeah, it's the first cover of them. Yeah,
correct. So yeah, you know, I think I've talked about this on my channel before. They call this the first cameo of Alpha Flight, and not so much. They're in it pretty much the whole time.
yeah. I wonder sometimes when it's a cameo because it's like they're in like 20 some odd panels, and it's like, is that really a cameo?
Right, exactly. And you know, the whole end of this, I think, is Wolverine talking to Sasquatch for like 4 pages. Like,
okay.
So first Alpha Flight, and of course, you know, then you have the first issue of Alpha Flight,
where
you get a lot of the characters that did not appear in here, like Puck, for instance. The character Puck, Marina, Tundra, Wild Child all show up in Alpha Flight. I have like 5 copies of this.
I had to pick that up too, like a while ago. It's like one of those books you have to have.
Right, exactly. I mean, and it's one of those ones like I can't say no to. You know, it's one of those books. It's a nice bright yellow cover,
and it's always cheap. It's a cheap book too.
It's wicked cheap. Yeah, exactly. So then one other thing I did find in Quebec, which I thought was really interesting, I got this at that one comic book store, and the guy who worked there said it's the oldest comic book store in the entire province of Quebec, which I thought was a little surprising. But he kind of explained that it's because the guy who owned it, who founded it, ran it out of his house for like decades before he actually got a brick and mortar store. I think that's why it has the claim to fame. But they have some pretty good wall books. So here we have an X-Men book again, X-Men number 33.
Oh, nice.
Awesome cover of the Juggernaut. But what surprised me the most is a little detail here. It's actually a 10 pence version, UK version.
Oh, it's the UK version. They're really rare.
Why they had it. He's like, I have no idea how that ended up here. So I don't know. So I went to Canada to get some Canadian comic books, ended up with a British one.
With a British one. But the British ones are really rare. Like I always say that they're undervalued. Undervalued because there's like 150 are like the UK price variant. It's like that rare. Like, and sometimes as little as 1 in 100 are UK. Yeah.
Well, so I did pay a little bit more. Like when I did the conversion in my head, you know, I paid like probably 60 US for it. It's probably like a $45-50 book. It's in good shape. But that was, then I thought about what the pence version is. I don't know what it is, but I couldn't find really an analog for it, and it's pretty early, you know. So
you can find it. You can find them on CGC's census thing.
All right,
and then you can find out how many were like on the census roughly.
Nice.
It's usually about 1/50th or 100th.
Wow, I didn't realize they were that rare. I always, you know, I mean, it kind of makes sense. And on the topic of comics from other countries, you know, recently did a trade with a guy in Germany, and it was sort of a blind trade. He's like, I know what you like. I'm going to send you a ton of stuff, and here's a list of what I want. Just send me what you can. And I had no idea what I was getting, so I got a German Giant Size X-Men #1.
Oh wow!
I got several German copies, but I also got a lot of UK copies because in Germany, a lot of those titles they could only get from England. Okay. So I got like the original Captain Britain series, the larger format.
Oh wow, those are good.
Yeah, I got a couple of these right here. I should have them right next to me. I can't reach them now. Sorry. Come on.
The problem is though they're hard to keep in good shape because they, really poor paper quality.
Really poor. You can tell. They don't have that like gloss finish that comic books have.
Yeah. I mean, it's almost like a newspaper.
Exactly.
Print.
It's exactly it. So I got a couple of these which are pretty cool. Again, it's not something you find very easily, so I was just happy to have them. I'd love to have Captain Britain #1. That's the one I really want. #8, I think, is first.
First Psylocke. Well,
Psylocke,
well, she becomes Psylocke. Yeah.
Right. So I have the the US versions of their first appearances, but I'd love some more of these. But yeah, I got a couple of these, but he did send me some pretty awesome German ones. I love this one.
Oh wow.
So this is
that's really nice.
Right. So they know the numbering's different, but this is the first cover appearance of Mary Jane in German. So
is that how many years later did that come out compared to the American edition?
So this one wasn't that bad. This one's only like a couple of years later or 5 years later, something like that. We're unlike the Giant Size X-Men is from like the 90s,
Oh,
so
wow.
it's like 20 years later. But this one actually is an older comic book, which I thought was pretty cool.
It looks really cool. It looks bigger than the.
It is. It's slightly bigger size. Yeah, it's almost like Bronze Age size. It's almost like a Hulk 181 size. So
yeah, it looks just wider to me. I don't know.
It's wider. It's the same height, but it's wider. So a little bit more than a Silver Age book.
But it looks really great. I actually like Die Spin. It looks really cool. Like
it does look cool, right? Yeah, Die Spinne. I know it's weird too. Same is true of the Captain Britain. I don't know if it's because they're not glossy, but the matte finish I feel like makes the contrast more in a weird way. Like the colors. Yeah, I don't know. The colors.
You put it in like a acid, what's it called? Like a good mylar, like case.
It's similar. It's similar. Yeah. It's like a brushed kind of like matte finish. Yeah. So, so I got a whole bunch of stuff like this, but a couple of them jumped out to me. I'm like, these are cool. And that's why I'm kind of like digging for these, international copies because they're not worth that much necessarily, but
but they're becoming cool. Like I think what's happening is that a lot of people are kind of saying, "Oh, these are interesting," and people are starting to pick up those books. Like I think of always the Mexican Spider-Man.
Yes,
how crazy that those have gone. But
I always wanted like any of the the Latin American characters like in Spanish is cool. I was like for me like Giant Size X-Men #1 was cool because it opens up with Nightcrawler and they're speaking German. I'm like, oh, that's really neat. We need to have them all in their own language. So I'd always want like, I don't know, who is it, like Tarantula? Who I'm trying to think of who like the Mexican characters are. But that would be cool to have that, right?
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah. Want me to keep showing stuff?
Yeah, show some stuff. Like people like seeing the stuff. People don't really like us. They like.
No, I've noticed that. Yeah, because we can see when people stop watching our videos, and like as soon as I start talking, people are like,
fast forward.
Yeah. So I have I have some X-Men books, but a couple I want to talk about just because of Mr. John Romita, who recently passed. I took out some Daredevil books. I was going to show off this Wally Wood, awesome.
Oh, nice.
Man, one of my favorite comics. As Wally Wood, obviously, talk about a light that burnt out too quick. Kind of a troubled guy, but by all accounts,
really kind of sad death actually on him.
Really sad, exactly. But killer artist, and he did not do nearly enough comic book work for us. So this is one of my favorite Daredevil books. So I was taking it out to look at it, and I remembered I had this one. So I grabbed a couple of John Romita books.
Oh, nice.
So this is Daredevil 16. This is
his first, I believe. Is it second?
So this is the first John Romita on Spider-Man. Is this book here?
That's what I knew it was a first Romita something.
Right. Yeah. It's one of those deep cuts, right? So it's the second Daredevil Spider-Man meetup, I believe. I think Spider-Man 16 when Daredevil's still in the yellow suit is their first meetup. This is their second, and Daredevil 16, coincidental first number. But this is the first time John Romita actually drew Spider-Man is in this book here, and then of course, switch over to that title.
More famous anyway for Spider-Man.
Exactly. And I got to show this. I think Alan, you might have seen this the other day.
I know that's the cover. I say that's his
This is it.
grail. This big
This
book.
is, if you're getting a John Romita Spider-Man book, this, in my opinion, this is my favorite Spider-Man comic book of all time, hands down. I love this cover. I recently I did a quick video on this where I found this in a basement collection, like a mile from my house.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. I also got a Hulk 181. I got some pretty crazy stuff out of that. But I was very happy to get this. This has been high on my list. I always look at it when I go to comic book shows. I got a great deal on it. There's just so many things going for it. It's sort of the triple threat, right? Great story. The Spider-Man No More.
Yeah.
Peter Parker
gives
quits
up the costume, and
throws away the costume, and Spider-Man 2, the movie, Tobey Maguire movie, loosely adapted.
They put it in. Yeah, it was great.
Exactly. And and it's the first appearance of Kingpin, second awesome thing for it. And then of course this cover is amazing. You don't have many covers where you have Peter Parker's face and the Spider-Man suit, and then this iconic red cover. I mean, I've been to so many comic book shows. You see this book from a mile away.
It's so simple yet quite brilliant. It's just like something about it just always caught my eye. It's
exactly
just like that. Yeah.
So so again, the Stilt Man made me pull out this one, and then I thought about this one, and down the rabbit hole you go, right?
Lower level. Sorry.
Exactly. So I had to pull that one out. And yeah, I do like X-Men quite a bit. So my favorite title. I love everything that Chris Claremont did. I've heard a lot of people.
I know a lot of people that collect the Chris Claremont run.
Yeah, and I'm working on. I think I only have like 20 left, if that. Yeah, I got to recheck my list. I got some recently, and I've heard people describe Chris Claremont as like very soap opera-y. And they're right. He absolutely is. It's like soap operas in space with the X-Men. But I like that. I like that it's a little bit more adults, a little bit more emotion. I never liked the simple books. I've never been a fan of like The Punisher. Like I never got it. I'm like, oh, he just shoots people. Okay, you know what I mean? I needed
I think
more.
that's why The Punisher always kind of didn't do well in a way. It didn't have that something to hook people to read the next book.
I think that's it, right? It was too simple to me. I needed to hear what the characters are saying. I needed to be complicated. I was one of those kids. I wanted okay, I like the X-Men. That's complicated enough. Oh, they're in space now? Sweet. I really like that. So my favorite storyline of all time is Dark Phoenix Saga. I finished this last year, I believe, where I got all of them. And these are some of my favorite books. I mean, they're obviously, most of these are key issues, first appearances of, Emma Frost and Shadowcat. Kitty Pryde is in this one. First Dazzler, awesome cover. So all of these have covers by John Byrne, except for this one. I think it's John Romita Jr. did.
Oh, nice.
This one. He has Dazzler. And Dazzler's not
I think
very compelling.
Dazzler, I think it was one of the Dazzlers where it was both senior and junior that did the cover.
It might very well. Oh no, it says junior and Chuck Austin. It looks like.
Yeah, I think it's Dazzler #1.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. And yeah, Dazzler's not for me wasn't the best X-Men character.
Well, it's disco mutants.
Right. Yeah, right. Exactly. It didn't age that well. Then they kind of made her like an '80s punk rocker. And then it didn't transfer over to the grunge of the early 90s well, so she just kind of...
I actually like the Dazzler just for her quirkiness. Just that I think it's campy, it's fun.
Yeah. And that's why this one sets it firmly in 1980. That's why I like this one. I think it's by far the best Dazzler book there is. Great cover. Part of the Dark Phoenix Saga, so excellent. Then first Emma Frost. First cover.
First cover. First cover. Or the White Witch or White Queen or
White Queen, with the John Byrne crazy eyes. He's really good at that. You'll see them again in a second on Dark Phoenix. And then you have all these, the first appearance of the Hellfire Club. First solo Wolverine cover. So a lot of people call this the first Wolverine solo story. That's not true. The X-Men are in this, but Wolverine's on a little side mission, kicking butt, trying to get back to them. But it's the first cover he appeared on without any other superhero.
That's fiction. Really weird.
I know, it's very specific. It's like those baseball stats when they call it that stat. You're like, how did you come across that? So very similar. So I thought, but it's a great cover. Probably my favorite Wolverine cover right here.
Well, it's sort of what I always think of Wolverine, just going around slaughtering a whole bunch of people.
Exactly. And there's a scene of him. He's hiding in the rafters while these guys are walking below him, and he's just lurking. It's just a really cool. First, if you're gonna have a first Wolverine story, it's awesome to see him kind of actively hunting these guys. So pretty cool there. He gets knocked. I think he gets shot. Does he get shot? I think he gets shot point blank range, and he's okay. And it's the first time they sort of directly allude to the fact that he's really tough. Maybe if not necessarily that he can heal fast, but you're like, wow, how did he shake that off? So
Yeah, it was later that he got the healing powers, right?
Right. So they don't say it's healing powers. You just think he's tough or like, you know, he's invulnerable or something. Because I think he's like point blank and he just gets up. So this one here is the first appearance of Jean Grey as the Dark Phoenix. She actually becomes the Dark Phoenix at the end of this book. Yeah, I had this one pressed and cleaned by my good friend Jeff at Comics Pal. I mention him on my channel all the time. He's fantastic. And this one I found in a flea market, you know, in Connecticut. And I had some like stuff in the, you know, ink or whatever. And the thing, he was able to get rid of it, you know, without compromising the integrity of the book. I'm not going to grade it, so I don't care, you know. First cover of Dark Phoenix, classic, with her grabbing the trade dress.
That's a crazy eye one. I always
that's another crazy eye. Yeah, John Byrne loves the crazy eyes, man. I got plenty of those. Doesn't matter if it's Emma Frost, Jean Grey, or Storm. They got the nuts crazy eyes. So and then of course you have this one here, very iconic cover. This is the homage that everyone knows. Batman holding, you know, Robin. It's Superman holding Supergirl in Crisis on Infinite Earths.
It's been done a million times, kind of thing.
10 million times. Here you have it again. And then this one here is the death of Jean Grey. She sacrifices herself because she's losing control. And then this sort of a final one where Cyclops leaves the team, kicks off a new paradigm of the team where, you know, you have the new X-Men from Giant Size X-Men and pretty much the old guard is all completely gone. So my favorite storyline of all time, lots of fun keys in there, fantastic art. I love showing it off just because, you know,
it's a great run.
Yeah, you know, a lot of times people are like, oh, this is one comic book that's good. And I would argue like, okay, well, here's 10. The value of these is just as much as that, but I feel like I can look at these a lot longer. I can show them off. You know, each one has a story. It's kind of like going through a big book. So I like to show those ones off. But
nice.
Yeah. I keep going all day, but I'd like to hand it over to you.
It's up to you. It's up to you. Okay. Well, we'll show some more in a minute. We'll show some more. Okay. But how do you feel about slabbing your books? Like putting. Like,
I've been.
Do you like them raw, or do you like?
I like them raw. I've been very vocal about this on my channel. You know, for me, I mean, I have lots of great.
Yeah, I see some slabs in behind you.
Yeah, exactly. And you know, my argument has always been this: like, I get why people slab books. It certainly it protects them. It nails down the value. It makes it a lot easier if you ever trade or sell it. You know exactly what it's worth. There's a census. It's pretty easy to know what you're getting.
It makes it a commodity.
It's a commodity, right? Exactly. But that's also why I don't like it, because it's not a comic book anymore. It's a commodity, right? The function of the thing is gone. It's to me, it's paramount to a guy who collects cars, collecting the body of a car without the engine. You know, people do that. They get cars and they can't drive them. There's no engine. It's similar to me. I'm like, well, it's not really a car. You can look at it.
Okay.
But if the cover is iconic and the character, like the first appearance or the thing that makes it a key is on the cover, I think it's fine. Like, so my Hulk 181.
That's why I like slabs, because I like to display it. I like to have it up, you know.
And you can look at it. You don't have to worry about, you know, getting damaged. You know, I did get a Hulk 181 recently. I don't have it now. My good friend at Comics Pal is cleaning and pressing it. I'm probably going to grade that one just because the value is so high. But Wolverine's right there. I mean, you're not losing much in that book. You're not going to read it anyways. And you go, there he is. He's right there fighting Hulk. First appearance. I get, you know, first Phoenix popping out right there. I'll make sure you guys that one. Signed by Chris Claremont. One of my favorite covers of all time, because she's, you know,
on the
right
cover.
There on the cover. You can just say, this is the first Phoenix. Literally right there. You're looking right at her, you know. Giant Size X-Men #1. You can see all the characters on the cover. So,
what I actually liked when you did your video where you got the Hulk 181 was you immediately went to the value stamp. I just thought that was like, that is like what every collector would do.
I know.
Just like, it's the stamp there. It's the stamp.
And you know, the guy I bought it from really had no idea what the value was, and he's wondering what the heck I'm doing. I'm like, I'm looking for the value stamp. He's like, what's that? I'm like, it's this. Thank God. Like, I let out a sigh of relief, you know,
because it's always cut out.
It was his book. He probably would have cut him out, you know, back in the day.
Yeah.
So that was
funny.
Crazy. That was a pretty crazy find. I didn't. Then my adrenaline wasn't like spiked. It was more of like dread. I was like, I can't believe this is in here. You know, we got to be more careful. This one here, the 50. My video came out. I gasped like a woman. I was like, I clutched my pearls. I was so surprised about it. I was like, you know, it was like a Mexican soap opera. I couldn't help it because it just completely caught me off guard. You know, and it's a book I've always wanted. So it's kind of fun to find those things in the wild.
It seemed like his collection was all of that generation where he had like runs of those books. So
He
Did he
did.
have like where would you say his ASM run started?
So he had some back around like in the 30s,
And
and
then
it went
straight
up
up?
pretty much, but we didn't find them all. And I felt bad. I had to cut the footage because we were whatever. I stopped filming. We were talking off the cuff a lot about like
Mhm.
private things I'm not going to put on
Yeah.
YouTube. But after I found the book, I don't know if you see it up on the shelf. You got number 51 right there, first
Yeah.
Kingpin on the cover. And he had 52, 53, 54. He had a whole
Nice.
bunch running up. So he had sporadically I found in the 30s. But when I was first over there, I only found a few Spider-Man books, and he had like all the Silver Age Marvel titles covered.
Mhm.
He had Fantastic Four from like 48 up, up to like 100. He had lots of Avengers. He had
Wow.
lots of Hulk, but he didn't really have Spider-Man. He had like 5 books. And I said, how did you not have Spider-Man? He's like, oh, I have Spider-Man. I just got to find it. And we found most of them in a cedar chest later on, like a couple days later.
Oh
So we
wow.
had a lot, but he keeps finding those books, man. Like, every time I go and drop over bags and boards to help him out, hey, I found another thing. He pulls out like a garbage bag, and there's like
Wow,
nuts,
that's crazy. Crazy.
nuts. So
So
yeah,
what is he like? I guess he was just buying them off the rack at the time, right?
yeah, with very few exceptions, he bought them all off the rack. Somewhat ironically, do this way. Yeah, you can't see it. The glare. I got a Fantastic Four 48 from him, and it's by far the book in the worst condition in his whole collection.
Yeah.
Because he didn't get it. It wasn't him off the rack. He got it from somebody else. It was like another kid or something like that.
And
Who
it
trashed it,
Yeah,
So
they just
his,
read it to death, kind of thing.
yeah, but despite the fact that his were just like unbagged on board, a lot of them were the old bags that were just covered in dirt. A lot of people give me a hard time in my comments about how I was handling them. I'm like, I could not handle them any different. They were
no,
glued
I hate
together.
those old bags. They're almost like it's almost like goo. Like
It's goo. They're like rubber. Like it was nasty stuff, and my hands are black, so you got to be really careful. But despite the fact they weren't in great, they were stored like that. I can't believe the condition of some of these books. Speaking of, slabs, the first time I got comic books from him, I got lots of stuff from like the 70s and 80s. And I had, just to make a video, I had my friend Comic Spa clean and press them, and I had sent them into CGC to grade them just to see, like, all right, can you
what
get
the
good
conditions
grades?
like?
Yeah, and they were all 9s and higher, like they were all high up. So I mean, unless there's some really egregious problems with like big color breaking spine ticks, you can press a lot of that stuff out. Unless it's a tear or something.
You should almost, for him, I know that you kind of did a deal where you might actually help him sell that collection.
Yes.
What you should almost look into is, I'm not sure how this is done, so I'm just putting it out there, but doing the pedigree. That it's a significant collection where you say, hey, it's all bought by the original owner.
Right.
It's a pedigree.
And that would be so cool. I mean, and I don't even know how to follow up with like, how do you get CGC to
I don't know. I just said that. I'm putting it out there. But
I mean, I would love to, because it was, because there's a part of me, no, it's a big part of me, the idea of breaking this up. He just wants to sell it, and get the most he can for it and move on from it. But, I'm thinking to myself, like, I just don't like the fact you're breaking up. As an antique guy, I love the provenance of something, right?
Well, that's my point.
Right. You can track this from this guy bought this off the shelf in 1968. It has not left his possession. The idea of that. So when he has a big run of like Submariner, he wants to break out them all. I'm like, no, sell them together. Like sell them. That'd be cool for someone to be like, this came from the same guy. I did laugh in my last video. Someone in the comments said, looks like there's color touch. I'm like, I'm sure there isn't. Like he bought this off the rack, he read it, and he threw it in a box, and it has not left since. So just got a good color on it. So yeah, there is something special about talking to someone who's had it in their possession since they bought it, but also someone who's detached from the value of comics. Is very rare in our hobby now to have him look at that book and be like, oh yeah, I remember reading that. That's a great story. Kingpin's in that. That's cool. Without any idea that like the first Kingpin is a key issue with value. It's fascinating to hear him read it, talk about comic books in the purest form.
I kind of understand that, because in his mind, it's 12 cents.
That was it.
What it's that's how much he paid. That's how much he's got into it. And I had that experience with certain books that I bought from the 90s or 80s that to me are like, whatever the cover was, right?
Right, exactly.
And then I find out, they're $100 book or whatever, and it's like I just don't feel like it. Like I have the first appearance of Bane, like that's like a cover buy for me, like and it's like, well, no, it's like it's a couple $100,
And that's what it's because I grew up in the 90s and I had that comic boom that happened. I've had like an adverse almost like, you know,
Yeah,
knee-jerk
that's what I'm
like
saying.
hatred for 90s books. It's like when I look at them, same thing. I finally caved and I traded for a first Deadpool. The idea of that book, it's New Mutants, man. It's
Yeah,
like,
I know, it's so common.
or like or any of those books, like they're so common. Like I can't, and they were everywhere as a kid. I can't justify spending the money for any Carnage.
That's what I'm saying. That's that, and maybe that's where he's kind of coming from. Is my thought.
That's exactly, and he's obsessed. Like when he looks at, oh, it's 12 cents. That's a good comic book. And if it's like 15 or 20 cents, it's like, oh, that's junk. And I'm like, no, it's still really good.
Not quite.
Not quite. Yeah. Yeah, which is so strange. I guess we kind of do the same thing, right? We remember the books as a kid, and they're locked in your memory as having that value.
Well, they were common. Everyone had them, but not many survived for his stuff. Lots survived from the 90s.
So that's what it's for me. This was disposable entertainment. You read it, you threw it away. You know, rip the cover off, whatever happens. You know, sports cards, you put it in your bike spokes. Yeah. When the 90s, people were like, I'm going to get rich. So they put it in a bag and board and you put it away. They didn't get thrown away, and they're in great shape. But like, I look at Spider-Man 300, man, like I can't like Spider-Man 300. My buddy had like 5 copies of that. And we just thought like, who cares? Like,
that's a crazy expensive book.
Now it is. Yeah. But even back then, we're like, oh, it's Venom. Who cares? You know, like it was Spider-Man's in a black suit. It's cool. Like, you know what I mean? It wasn't special back then. It was just kind of a neat, weird. I never liked it because I didn't like the 300s all over. I thought it was dumb looking as a kid. Really? As a kid, I hated that book. So it's just bizarre to me when I see the prices for these books. I just can't, get the mental gymnastics to work. But I'm getting there. But it's fun.
Well, so what books would you be chasing now? In terms of if I'm not saying lunch money here. This is not lunch money anymore. This is big books. What big books would you chase?
So I want to finish for little books. I got to finish the Chris Claremont run. I probably have 20 books or less, and they're not all the big ones I have, but there's a lot of like $80 to $100 books. Those early 100 run, ones.
There's a lot of keys in there. Yeah,
little minor keys. So I wouldn't call those big ones, but those are the not dollar books. And if there's any I'm missing in the run, like I refuse to spend more than $1 if it's like above 200. Number 200. The big books though. So when I got out of that collection, I got Hulk 181, which is my number 2 book on my list. Yeah. Fantastic Four 48, even though I have a very low condition one, that was number 3 on my list. The more I look at it, I love having it. I would like a nicer version of it. Yeah. Amazing Spider-Man 50 was my number 5 book. So actually, I had this conversation with 2 of my buddies the other day at the Absolute Gamer Nerds. We were having this conversation like, so what was your 1 and 4? Number 1 is X-Men number 1. I'm an X-Men fan.
Kind of makes sense. That's good.
You like
X-Men? That kind of makes sense.
That's it. They're my favorite. X-Men number 1 is absolutely number 1. People have asked me, what would you trade for it? I'd pretty much trade anything for it. I would have that. I could replace everything else. Those are getting extremely scarce. That's number 1. That's if I ever do a video and get an X-Men number 1, I don't know what Lunch Money is going to do.
You'll find one. Yeah,
I will find one. Number 4 is Daredevil number 1.
Okay.
I love Daredevil. I just showed you a couple of those early ones. I have a really good run of early Daredevil. I'm only missing 1 in number 7, First Red Suit.
Really?
Yeah, those out of the first 10, those are the ones I'm missing, and I have a whole bunch up through like the first 50.
Those are the 2 Daredevil. First I went after for the sub 10.
Oh, really?
Those are the first 2 I went after.
They're the best 2. They have to be the best 2. So Daredevil number 1, and again, that's one of the ones where I know it's on my list. If it happens someday. I'm not like really going out of my way to find one. I'm sure I will. And then a really high up there, X-Men number 4, first Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver. Nice. Again, as an X-Men fan, first Brotherhood of Mutants.
So many characters in that as well.
So many.
And
awesome
Toad,
cover.
I think, as well. And
I have a funny story about that one too. I could have gotten one at a really, really great price. It was a comic book store in my hometown. They had one on a shelf. I showed it in the video, and they gave me coupons to give out like 20% off. And because I was helping them out, they were giving me like 20 or 30% off the comic book. So I'm like, I'm going to get that comic book next time I see him at the comic book show. So I'm handing out all these coupons to everyone I see. Like when I go to shows, I'm like, hey, I'm supposed to hand these out. Okay. So when I finally get to the big show where I go to buy it, it's missing. I'm like, hey, where's X-Men 4? And he's like, you're going to hate this. He said, no. One of the guys you gave the coupon to went and bought it like yesterday. So I was my own downfall. I gave someone a discount and they got the book. So I didn't get my X-Men 4. Still high on my list. So those are the top 3 big monster books. But this is Lunch Money Comics because I spent so much money recently. I'm kind of going back to the cheap flea market, yard sale finds. I still find great stuff, you know. I don't think I'm going to find those really big ones, but you know, someday, way far in the future, I think an Amazing Fantasy 15. I don't think I'll ever own one, but that would probably be like the magnum opus grail. But I'm not holding my breath for that one. I'd be happy with an X-Men one, and I can retire.
Do you ever do trades for comics where you?
I love trading comics.
Yeah,
my favorite way to get new comics.
Like one of the, I forgot what Instagram channel it is, but there's a guy on Instagram. I think he set as his goal book as AF-15. Okay.
Right. Yeah, that's all I think I know about.
And he started with a dollar bin book, and he's gradually, you know, trade after trade, working his way up.
Yep. I've thought about doing that because I do so many flea markets. You know, what is it called?
That's what I'm saying. It's like perfect for that.
The paperclip trick or the
thumbtack. I love that.
You know?
I love that story. That story is
exactly. So I've been thinking of doing that. It's wicked hard to do. Like the way I hunt, especially when I go to Brimfield, biggest flea market in the world. That would be where I do it, but it would take me days. You know, it would be have to be a long, like anthology series that I would do. I've definitely thought a lot about it. I think I could do it. Because I've just traded up so many cool things. I've got first Black Panther somewhere back here. Okay. I spent some cash on it, but the half of that value was trade of stuff I got at flea markets for like nothing.
Yeah.
So that was sort of like that, and that was what gave me the idea. I was like, if I just grab some more books, I could have said I completely got this from hunting at flea markets and yard sales.
Well, if you get like a bunch of like $10 books for $1. And just that easily can become something big, right?
Right, exactly. And I have that one I got a lot out of trade. I got that first Deadpool. I traded a whole bunch of stuff, and I think only one of those books that I traded I got like at a comic book store, and it was cheap. It was like $36. All the other ones were I got in like pawn shops and stuff. They were toss-ins, or I bought a lot. So same thing. Like I'm like, oh, I have first Deadpool now. I would never would have paid money for it again, 90s. But I'm like, oh, if I could trade, I love the Black Panther. If I ever traded like Black Panther and Deadpool, I did the math. Okay, now we're getting up there.
Something a bit bigger. It's a
right, exactly. So I've definitely thought about that. And like I said, I could probably trade for an X-Men one right now if I found the right person.
Hopefully, somebody watching this will have an X-Men one. And
send me offers, guys. You can find me on Instagram, Once Many Comics IG. Hit me up. I'd be curious to know. This is it's a slippery slope, because I've always said, if people ask me, what would you give up?
Probably give up a fair amount.
My favorite comic in the whole world. That was a big deal when I got that. I sold a whole bunch of old Star Wars CCG cards, by the way. I don't know if you guys know that. It was a customizable card game in the 90s. I was really good at it, actually. Next to comic books, that was the only other thing I never sold. And they went up in price during COVID, and I dumped a ton of them. And I said, I'm buying a giant size X-Men #1. So that's what I did. But it's low grade. It's a 2.5. Even looking at the slab, it was never cleaned or pressed, the book in there. So I've had that dilemma. Do I crack it? Whatever it is. But I keep looking at it, and it's my favorite book. But I would trade it. I'd either upgrade to a better one, or if it really came to it, someone offered an X-Men one, and that was part of it. I mean, I can't say no. I could get another giant size X-Men #1. I'm pretty sure. So
they're easier to find.
I just don't want that moment where I'm like giving up books that have a story. There's a story attached to it. Those are the hard books to move on from. It's not the value; it's the personal, stake.
For me, for X-Men, Giant Size and X-Men 1 are the two big books, like #1 and 2. Like,
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I was hunting for Giant Size X-Men for a long, long time before I got my copy, and I actually think mine was undergraded, but yeah.
Yeah, mine was. I think I've told the story on a channel before. Yeah, I think I did my top 5 comics in my collection. I did all cheap books except for that one, because the story was I was in Maine. My sister and her fiance have a place up in the middle of nowhere in Maine on a lake, and I was watching a whole bunch of X-Men, giant size X-Men's on like eBay, and I missed out on one because I had no cell phone coverage. I'm like hitting the bid button. And end up selling for less than my bid, and it was a steal. It was like I don't remember what it was. It was a grade like 3.5, but it sold at the time. It was like barely anything. And I was like on tilt. Like when you're at a casino and you start losing, and just like, what else is up there? And I just happened to look on like Facebook Marketplace at that moment, and like an hour before, some guy's like, "Here's this giant size X-Men #1, accepting cash, whatever." And he was in Rhode Island, so I contacted him, and I'm like, "I will give you cash today." We went back and forth, and then. Right when I got back to Massachusetts, drove 3 hours. He's like, if you can meet me at this mall in Rhode Island in an hour,
like
2
the
hours.
Sketchiest way to buy a comic, by the way.
It was so sketchy. And I like dropped I unpacked the car. I said, see ya, honey. and we happened to have the cash. You know, we were paying a painter or something, and I grabbed the envelope and I just sped. So I drove Maine back to Massachusetts, all the way back to Rhode Island, and I sat down in this food court as they were closing, and I bought that comic book. And just the story, I mean, it was like it was meant for me, right? I missed that comic book, and like literally, I look on Facebook Marketplace. It's the first post an hour before, and it's, you know, 2 states away. I couldn't believe it. I could drive there, and it was all that day, and I got it. And so because of that, like, it's low grade, but like I like the story just as much as the book.
No, that's cool. That's cool.
So
I did the same thing with Tales of Suspense 39.
Oh yeah. Nice.
I was like trying to work out the deal with the guy on eBay, and he's like, hey, you know, I don't live that far from you.
Right.
And, you know, it's like, let's do a cash deal. And I was
Absolutely.
like, and he basically, he had the price in US dollars, and it was like reasonable. Actually, it was a good price in US dollars, but then he said he would honor it in Canadian dollars, the same amount.
There you go.
If I paid in cash. So I drove there. I like literally just went to the bank and said, okay, I got to take out a bit of money.
Right.
And ran over to, like, it was like 2-hour drive, but yeah,
awesome.
Why not? Yeah.
I did find out something kind of troubling. So I had to get cash for a couple of things. You know, like I ran to the ATM, and my ATM had like a $200 limit. I'm like, well, that's not very useful. Like, you know, what if it's an emergency? So I'm telling my wife, she's like, there's no limit. I'm like, oh no, there definitely is. I just tried it. She's like, I'll be right back. She goes to the ATM, pulls out $1,000. I'm like, how did you do that? So there's only a lock on my card, but she doesn't have it. So.
Maybe they know that you buy too many comics.
I'm wondering if she just kind of played dumb. She's like, oh, is there? Wow, how'd that happen?
Oh,
you know?
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Lesson learned.
That sounds like a wife thing to do.
Right. Exactly.
So I want to ask you, okay, what are you up to, and where can people find you? And, you know.
Sure. So yeah, I'm on YouTube. Lunch Money Comics is the name of the channel. You can also find me on Instagram at Lunch Money Comics IG, where I post some kind of sneak peeks every once in a while.
Oh, nice.
But yeah, I mean, it's not my certainly not my main job. You know this. It's not
I know
profitable enterprise, but we do it for fun, and it's a good time. You know, I'm an engineer by trade, and I'm also a musician, paid musician. So I have lots of other things. I have 2 young kids, lots of extracurriculars. So it's most of my recording is done in the wee hours while everyone's asleep.
When everyone's sleeping,
I don't know how you do every day, man. Like
I try to find time.
I wish I could do it. But yeah, that's where you can find me, YouTube, guys, and just I'm just kind of going.
So everyone go over and sub. Actually, got to point that way. Sub Lunch Money Comics. I'll put the link in the description and to your IG as well.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. And thanks again for coming on the show. It was really
thank
great
you for having me, man.
We'll have to do this again. You find some cool books, and like, or we do a hunt where you find some Golden Age, and you know.
I know. I feel bad. I don't find that much Golden Age. We talked about this. That's the one thing I do not find in New England very often. You find lots of Ninja Turtles. I told you. I got
you were saying.
Yeah, I got that at an antique store, but no, Golden Age is few and far between. So, but I've always said this, Alan, you know, everyone out there listening. You have more institutional knowledge on comic books than like anyone I know. Like, I know when we had that like informal conversation, I'm showing you books like grainy footage, and you're like, this year, this artist, this is the publisher. You off the top of your head, man. And so you're my guy. You know, I'm gonna lean on you. If I ever have any Golden Age questions, you're my guy. Okay, cool. Okay, well, thanks again. Everyone watching, subscribe to his channel. Okay. Thank you very much. Thanks again. Bye. Thanks, Alan.